Chapter 3. Snow White gazed into the well. Every day since her father had left to find whatever danger was lurking beyond the castle walls, Snow White had gone to the well and wished for a safe return. Day after day, she whispered, "Please come back." And day after day, the well was silent, offering no answer. Her stepmother didn't offer any answers either. Snow White had tried in the beginning to ask the new queen for news, but she was always met with silence or a wave of the hand, so she had stopped asking and gone back to wishing and hoping. But with each passing day, it was harder to keep her hope alive. The palace guard had not returned, nor had the huntsman. It was as if they had vanished. No matter how often Snow White repeated her wishes or ran her fingers over the words on her locket, she didn't feel fearless, fair, brave, or true. There were reminders of all that had changed. The portrait of her father and stepmother that now dominated the portrait gallery, the doors to the locked rooms that used to be open, the library, the music hall, all because her stepmother did not find a need for such things, and the woman herself whose icy beauty kept Snow White at a distance. In her chambers, the queen paced. She was growing anxious, not because her husband had yet to return. She knew he never would. Instead, her anxiety stemmed from her stepdaughter, Snow White. She had seen the girl down by the wishing well with her eyes full of tears. Still, she was beautiful. Her sadness almost made her more so, but because despite it, the girl clearly retained hope that her father would return, love for the village she was no longer allowed to visit, and dreams of a better life ahead. It all poured out of her even in the darkest moments, and that bothered the queen. Letting out a deep breath, the queen approached an alcove of her chambers. Her long black skirt swished about her legs, with its fine fabric rustling as the train followed along the stone floor. It pleased her slightly to pretend she wore black in mourning for her missing husband. The truth was, she liked the color, or the lack thereof. It brought attention to her sharp cheekbones, her dark brown eyes, and her auburn hair, attention she relished. She stepped into the alcove and paused. An ornate mirror hung on the wall. It was one of her most prized and powerful possessions. Its surface reflected the dark room, and then, as the queen approached, her face came into view. She arched one perfectly plucked eyebrow and gazed at herself. Yes, she was still beautiful, but she was beautiful enough. Brush your teeth? Okay. You want to do it? Here we go. Good job. I will. Lifting her head, she spoke, her deep voice steadier than her pounding heart. "Magic mirror on the wall," she began. "Who is the fairest of them all?" She waited, forcing herself to stay still. The mirror was not just any mirror, after all. It was her most valued and trusted advisor. Suddenly, her reflection burst into green flame. Through the flickering glow, another face appeared. It belonged to the phantom of the mirror. The queen allowed herself to edge closer, unable to stop her desire to hear what the magic mirror would say. "You, my queen," the mirror replied, "of all the women reckoned fair, your beauty is beyond compare." The queen sagged with relief. She had never doubted her beauty or power before, not until she had met that blasted Snow White with her ruby red lips, raven hair, and perfect complexion. And the joy, ugh, it made her sick to see that joy Snow White brought to others simply by being near them. She was a threat. Of this, the queen was sure. But Snow White was not more beautiful than the queen was. The mirror had said as much. So let the girl have her adoring villagers and her youthful good looks. They would fade in time. Loss would do that to a person, and Snow White had lost everyone. Satisfied, the queen turned and left the alcove. There was work to be done. She had a kingdom to ruin, or rather run, after all. As the days drifted past and the king did not return, a dark shadow spread across the village and the fields beyond the castle walls. The magical creatures did not venture from the forest to spin spells, and the sun did not dare to shine as bright with the queen in charge, so crops withered on the vine. Food became scarce, and the farmers and shepherds were forced to accept the only job offered now, to be members of the queen's palace guard. Snow White, now dressed in rags and forced to work as a servant, stood still and silent as a maid pulled a pair of scissors out of her pocket and began to hack at Snow White's beautiful hair. Strands of black fell to the ground. Under the orders of the queen, the maid cut and cut until the long locks were gone. But if Snow White had dared to look at her reflection, she would have seen the truth. Her beauty still shone, for even in her darkest hour, she had a radiance that could not be dimmed. Ordered to take everything of value, the palace guard began in the village. They pulled down paintings, statues, tapestries, and brought them to the queen, who hoarded them like a dragon sitting on its pile of gold. And any image of the old queen or reference to the king was destroyed and replaced with the current queen's own insignia and image. Soon the village was bare, and the pantries nearly empty. Those who remained stayed hidden inside, fearful of setting off the wrath of the queen. Even the birds and animals had fled the village, seeking solace in the distant woods. All that displeased the queen was banished, and the only magic left was dark magic. The castle gates were shut and bolted, and where once there had been a celebration of life and joy in the world, now there was just a cold, dark castle that cast its shadow and blocked out the sun. If a villager had dared to look up one afternoon, many long days after the king's disappearance, they might have caught sight of the queen standing on her balcony. It was her favorite perch, and if they had been able to get close enough, they might have seen the smallest of smiles flash across her face. It was a smile of victory, for she had won. The kingdom was hers, the people frightened into devotion. In the heart of it, Snow White remained, though the queen's constant berating and cruel comments took their toll, dampening her spirit. The queen wanted Snow White never to forget that it was she, not Snow White, who ruled now. She looked at Snow White as but another mouth to feed, another one of her workers. In time, even Snow White began to think of herself that way, forgetting that she had ever been called princess. But while she forgot, some remembered, those who loved her most, and in the dark of night, they would whisper her name, like something out of a myth. Even as the days wore on, there were those, like the little girl Snow White had bestowed her crown on, who did not forget. Standing by the town well, under a starry sky, the little girl clutched the flowers to her chest. And then she watched in despair as the last of the petals fell, dropping onto the still water, rippling the surface. Where is she? The little girl wondered. Where was the princess born on the coldest of nights, who had the warmest of hearts? And would she ever return? Could she bring back the light that had been stolen? Or would they live in the queen's shadow forever?